So good afternoon and welcome to the AER's information session regarding the implementation of submitting well license applications into the OneStop platform. I'm Jenny Miller. I'm with the AER's industry engagement team, and I support all the engagement activities with the IDA program. So for the last 5 years, the AER has been working on an initiative called IDA, or the Integrated Decision Approach. That is the multi-year initiative that is transforming the way we deliver on our regulatory processes. And one of the elements of that IDA is the OneStop platform, or the technology that is used to support this change. We have you here for 2 hours. The presentation could run anywhere from 40 minutes to an hour. There's a lot of information coming, a lot of good news coming, so we will open up the floor to questions afterwards. Today's presentation will also be posted on the AER's YouTube channel sometime next week or the week after. It will also be accompanied by a video that is a demo of the system itself. We are going to take a little bit of time, and Lori will do this in her presentation, so be patient with us. For those that may not be familiar with OneStop or the IDA program, there's likelihood that you've been exposed to it to some degree. But we are going to pause, be patient with us while we do a little bit of introduction to put this into context for those that haven't been exposed to it. I would like to introduce you to the members of the project team that are joining us. The project lead is Corey Zadko. He is not here with us. He will join us later on. But we have Lori Wilson-Temple, who's the business lead for the WELS project. She's our main presenter today. There's Julie Rossi, who's the specialist that's also supporting the team. Is Yulia here? No, okay. There's another one, Yulia Yoseb, that's also a specialist that is supporting the project. And as you can appreciate, there's several AER staff behind the scenes working on this, programming, developing, training, change management, that are continuously working on that, but too many to mention. So what you're going to see today is we, again, are going to go through high-level messaging on the IDA. Then we are going to do a quick overview on the successes of components that have already been released into the OneStop application and how the WELS project complements those suite of activities. We will go into the features of the new system and changes implemented in the licensing process for Phase 1, and then we'll move into what we hope for you to expect for Phase 2.
So, good morning, good afternoon. It's afternoon on this one. Thank you for coming to spend some time with us today. You know, we are really pleased with this module that we put into OneStop, and we are going to be really happy to show you what has been built into this OneStop platform that's going to make and drive your business so much easier than it is today. So we really want to just do some touch points on the integrated decision approach. Some of it because some of the people here actually, we identified even this morning, and as we work through this thing, this is actually their first encounter with it. They're doing work at their companies that is not entirely involved in or involved at all in the integrated decision approach. I also want you to hear what the intent is of that whole approach, and then I want you to hear about the changes. You'll recognize it as we hit the changes we've made to well licensing as a process and the application forms in general, and you'll hear us aligning with that approach to make this all work consistently. So the approach doesn't mean that we're making any big decisions or we're making any changes about decision making, the processes and that type of thing. We are levering technology and adjusting our processes to align with our objectives. We are not changing regulation. We are not adjusting complex technical requirements through this. This is at a foundational level to do the integrated decision approach so that regulatory processes actually become less complex and easier to understand so that you can move through them more quickly and get your information in front of the AER. So it's changing how you're interacting with us. I mean, gone are the days that we're filing paper applications, or even the things eventually we won't be filing in EASE-IR and doing things there. You're going to come into the OneStop, which has some standard features in it that you're going to see are consistent across the whole suite of business that is in OneStop. So the key piece of that is that there are also aspects that are transformative to this. So we're using common risk management frameworks and consistently evaluating the application and focusing issues where additional review is required, so that we are not looking at everything all the time, or sometimes at any time, that we've been able to adjust using this technology ways that this assessment is done by the computer programming, by the technology, and rely on that to process applications of a certain type. So an integrated application is built. Just keep this ratio in mind. One application, one review, one decision. We're changing the way you can submit this stuff. And I say can because we're still, funny enough, in early days. And you can put applications together. It is not a mandatory requirement, but you're going to be able to see that kind of opportunity in your business to do it where it makes sense, or to stand alone on other applications and so on. So you're getting more options all the time in how you're interfacing with the organization and what you're filing. So you can apply for multiple authorizations in one application through the IDA program. Submitting information once into a single system is another big piece of this. If you've gone and done some work, sought a variance, for example, and then come in and say, well, I got the variance, we're not asking you for a copy of those things. We're going ahead and relying on the fact that you have an engagement, you say you have, and you've obtained things that you need. So we're going to make sure that we're only getting that detail at one time from you once. So we also, because of the information that goes into the file, we are able to implement a risk assessment approach, or a risk-informed approach, really, to the decision making. We're able to use the detail you put in the application and the spatial information that's derived from running a shapefile and assessing where does this proposed activity, the proposed well, sit in relation to all kinds of things that are of concern. If they are not in those, or they don't inspire an additional review because they're very routine types of matters, then the risk assessment approach directs that application into a kind of processing stream that is commensurate with that kind of application type. To have the spatial area, or to have the area where a well is located working and running against the spatial rules that we have that say, if you're near this, do this, if you're in that, do this, that allows that to happen again automatically and inform you of what kinds of things you need to do to get a successful application through here. Efficiency, well, this is going to be of especially good value to you in the efficiency thing. There are three aspects of efficiency that we are challenged to meet in every case. Knowing what our expectations are here, avoiding wasting time and guessing what we're going to look at in your application. That's the first one. The second one is removing the duplication and having predictability through the integration. And number three, levering the technology to interact in a faster way. So those pieces are things that have started when IDA started. So what was the first thing to go in? How long have we been at this? June 2016, the AER changed the process for submitting, reviewing, and issuing reclamation certificates. We've had a lot of questions about why that end-of-life activity went first, but frankly, it's what's ready to go to some degree, depending on the processes we're using, the volumes of applications we get of certain things, and that was a good way and a good place to pilot the integrated decision approach. So we've relied on the good work they did and considerably improved on that on every step as applications go in. So what have we added since? There's reclamation went first, pipeline applications and amendments are in there now, new and amendment applications under the Water Act, area-based closure mapping is in there, and just last month on the 19th of August, really closely timed with ours, which has been quite challenging, was the approvals under the Public Lands Act, and that is a monster system. So we not only are going longer, we're getting bigger on everything that we do and more impactful. So good that we've had some smaller things that led into this to make sure that we've got this working as desired. Other pieces, of course, are things in the notifications and submissions bucket daily tower reports are coming in. We've got code of practice under the Water Act. Pipeline construction activities are notified through there. Liner installations, line tests, flaring and venting notifications, contravention reporting under APIA. I know it's always a dream to see all the directives listed here, and I'm sure you instantly know what they are, but let's remember that the Directive 84 is the Peace River emissions controls, 39, the benzene emissions from glycol dehydrators, D60, methane emissions, vent gas, fugitive emissions reporting, Directive 20, where you're going in to do well surface abandonments, and Directive 13, various suspension-related activities. All of that is now installed in this OneStop platform. So how did we get started here? We started approximately a year ago. It was actually September of 18 last year. We have had an absolutely wonderful industry working group who has been in place and working with us since that date. So we went out to ask at CAP at people that we often have had involved and so forth, and we got a nice widespread business participation here. So there were small companies, a little bit of service work, big companies, intermediate companies, all kinds of people who are interacting with us, including some of the service companies who had some input that they wanted to have. So what did we do? We all started to meet, and this group particularly, this industry group, helped validate the approach that we had thought about at that point. And then they came back to the table with us with ideas and recommendations that were refocused through the industry lens. So these are people in the industry who are telling us that that's great, that looks great, but do it this way because that will work better for the processes that we typically see out in industry. So that has adjusted. It did adjust some of the things the way we were doing it. We regularly met and shared our progress and challenges. We also had 2 play dates, and that's going to become a new word around this organization. We had this group in that as we had features and the application working, for example, initially for the single well application, which was the simplest one, we had them come in and we gave them some instruction how to use it, and they rumbled around in there, and they're trying to figure out if they can break it, how intuitive it is, and that is exactly what they came back to us with. There were things that we designed in a certain way, thinking these were helpful or these were useful, and they told us they weren't, and we removed them, and this is what they needed, and we added them. So it's been a very interactive process. The play dates were great because we had an assessment from both sides, and we were able to implement the products that were being used, or anything that was suggested that we be using. And you're seeing that in the final product today. You will see that in the final product that goes out for wells. Petronex, we talked with them, lots of information. Your production all goes there, you know that, but there's all kinds of interaction between the AR and Petronex, and flow through information that goes to them from our databases and so forth, and we needed to make sure that that works. We can't disrupt other business by anything we're doing in wells. Representatives from the government of Alberta, particularly Alberta Energy, leasing, mineral trespass, the well data services, all those kinds of people need to see certain data in certain ways, and we have worked through all of those places to ensure that we are fully aligned with all of those places that we send and in some cases receive data from. Big internal collection, Jenny touched on that, of people in this organization who not only participated as subject matter experts, but are now, as we speak, being here in this room, they are still sitting upstairs doing acceptance testing to ensure that everything that they do is still working the same, so that we don't have any bumps coming when this whole system gets implemented. Critical data management has to endure for the industry, for the sake of the organization and so forth. I think people who've worked wells too as a process area at a company understand how foundational it is. You know, you may do a bunch of work, you will do a bunch of work before you're acquiring a well license, but once you start and you drill a well and you put it on land that you acquired and hopefully get production, the things that flow out of that are immense. We don't have, and here at the AER, we don't have inspectors inspectors who have anything to do, typically, unless they're going out and looking at things that have been licensed or that are operating eventually and later in life. Those kinds of things all start with this well license, so keeping those things moving keeps you moving. So we've had a very high regard for that. Some of the other systems were not as interactive and were not as needing to be as integrated as a well license does. So it's the start of almost everything. How will OneStop process your application? So initially it's going to use that series of assessment rules on all the applications submitted right at the start. So the analysis using these assessment rules, and that's in place in OneStop. So if you've been working on that, you've seen some of the results of those even right now. The goal is that using those rules, low-risk applications referred to as standard or baseline will move through the system quickly, while high-risk applications referred to as additional review or manual review are forwarded to AER staff for a more detailed evaluation. For example, an example of that, a risk assessment can trigger additional review when a licensee needs a variance from something. So this is the requirement, this is the rule, you need a variance. To get the variance, you're going to do one of two things. You're either going to get it ahead of time, and I'll talk about that in a moment, or you're going to ask within the application to get a variance consideration, and that's going to take some hands-on effort. So those kinds of activities will generate additional review, but the assessment tells us which way it's going by how you've responded to the question. So, you know, other business rules or validations are run against the data as you enter, and it is as you're entering it. We have to maintain a very high quality of the data going in because decisions are being made from that, recommendations are being made. Sending it into which stream of processing it's going is directly tied to how you answer the questions. Things that may have identifiable just errors or inconsistencies can be detected. You start saying, I'm going to drill to 10,000 meters. You probably aren't, and that's something that in the ranges we've built into it. So every place we could get 2 or 3 entry pieces to talk together, we'd say that doesn't seem logical, and we started to mark things. And how we've marked them is if that seems to be out of range or missing, you're going to get a great big red box around the item. It's going to have an indicator of exactly what seems to be wrong, and you're going to get a red asterisk in the legend column of the application that just says, in this part of the application is a problem. And if you don't fix it, it is not able to be submitted. So it is allowing you to go along as you go. You might be doing some of that. You're going to be working on an application that you're not going to submit for a little bit, and that highlights for you what data you're now missing. If you're still waiting on one of your drilling department people to come and bring you stuff, you could sit and have that asterisk there, and it'll only go away when you get compliant looking data into that data field. So it's going to keep that record, so you don't have to keep reviewing things, because you can validate it any time on any page or at the end or whenever you want to. That system is going to tell you when there seems to be a problem. It's going to tell you when mandatory responses have not been made. There is an asterisk behind every place that is a mandatory item. So as soon as the question is asked or the data header appears, there's an asterisk behind it, which also tells you that it is a mandatory data element that has to have an entry of some kind. I think that sometimes, of course, it depends on what the item is. You'd have to get an application in before you knew if there was trouble with it or problems with it. The extra value of this system is that these reviews, so validation reviews and assessment reviews, are all happening in your shop. You're seeing the same thing we're seeing when it gets here. So you're going to be able to look at that. There's transparency for you to know how it will be processed. If you're intentionally sending it in, you want that waiver, and that's great, because it's going to tell you in this confirmation page that you can go to at any time, or it'll generate for you in a couple of other places, but at least at the end of the application as well. It will tell you how it's going to be processed based on the suite of answers you've given. And it will go down. If anybody's working in some of those places that those assessment rules are working in today, you'll see that it will say, this is the business area, or this is the set of questions, and this is all baseline review. Or it will say, this is the item, and this is going for additional review. So again, before it leaves your shop, you know how it's going to be processed. So I want to walk through some of the significant functionality changes. Also want you to keep in mind that if I don't talk about it, if I don't say, and one of the good examples today was H2S information, it looks a little different, but that's just because we've adjusted some of the screens a little bit. It is the same information going into the application today as it was before. So there's no change in that, so I did not put it in these slides here so that you could understand the changes in functionality and be alert to what's happening here. So what I want you to know is that we took the original well license application, we reviewed absolutely every element in the current D56 application in detail, and we determined what information we were gathering, what the use was of that information, whether it was necessary or important to gather it, especially at this time. So that's a timeliness piece, is if it's better at a different time in the life cycle of the well, maybe we shouldn't be doing it up at the well licensing stage. We asked yourself a series of questions. What's the specific purpose? What do we need it for? How is it going to be used? Is it going to be used in the decision-making process ultimately? So we have lots of things where we get to the end and we say we still have to have that because it's involved in the decision-making process. And then even more importantly, what's the consequence if we discontinue doing this? And is this still the right time to be doing it? So our determinations of running every data element in that meant that we discontinued several data elements or removed other questions to focus on only what is needed. So we we've considered also anything that was missing in the application details or needed updating, because since the last time the forms were changed or the data gathering was changed, we've introduced some new requirements and you're doing different things that are additive, and we wanted to put them into the easier bucket rather than have covering letters and a variety of other things coming. So we also looked for opportunities to integrate, because that's a big part, of course. Integrated application integrated approach, we need to look at where we can integrate things or it's giving you the opportunity to do that work together. So you can do the pipelines, you can do water acts, you can do public land dispositions at the same time within the same application. You can choose not to, but that opportunity is there for you to do it, and some of that reliance on details as we continue to improve these systems, we'll build in things where you're going to share this. Like today we have a shapefile for a well that's going to be required. There's a shapefile for public lands. At some point they will completely merge, but we've got to take a few baby steps while we're working through that kind of improvements. So what are you going to see in the application module? You're going to see you can apply for just a single well. You can apply for a small or a large pad of wells. You can apply for a small or a large oil sound evaluation program, unrestricted as to the size of it or the number of wells. So there used to be some artificial limits in there, seem to be at a capacity for the system. If you're running a 200 well program for an oil sound evaluation program, you can put them all in the one application and move through those applications, sharing the information that they should, very similar to how it processes today. Only minor changes to the specific well data as you move from well location to well location. The computer doesn't know how big a pad is. It could be an in situ pad with injectors and producers sitting 15 meters apart, or it could be 3 townships of oil sound evaluation wells. It just thinks it's a pad. And the processing works, in fact, exactly the same way, where only certain bits of information change, other ones are maintained and copied into the record. So your data entry functions are much reduced in cases like that. So in order to align to this more simplified approach to the other thing that we did was we started to make some changes in well classification and the timing of the use of confidential status. And I'm going to talk about that in a second in a little bit more detail. But you will see some changes in that area, but you will understand that, or you will see that it is a significant simplification from what it has been, and so we'll go easier and hopefully appreciate that. There are focus changes, really administrative changes in Directive 56, caused by those changes to classification and confidential management. And they are, we have done the administrative changes. They've been improved internally. And when the bulletin goes out next week to give you all the last detail about roles, responsibilities, the rollout things, what's happening on what dates, their Directive 56 material will go out as well. But I want to focus you because while Directive 56 has sort of technically been amended, it is only that 6 or 7 pages in section 7.8 that talks about well classifications, confidentiality, and cuttings. That's the only changes currently in Directive 56. So not to worry, I know it's late coming out, but you're not going to have much to digest there. I actually think you're going to get through it fairly easily. One of the things that we've talked about in here as well is that we are able to do an integration of wells and of the public lands. And one of the features of that is that we are disconnecting which one you do first. So we, if you have public involvement met on your applications, you can come in and get the well license application, and that might be in advance of the finalized public involvement in your authorities on your land. This will be public and private lands as well. So what you need to know is conduct your business accordingly. We're going to let you access, if we're not going to check, do you have a public lands disposition? Do you have a lease signed with somebody? You can come in and acquire those things separately or in advance of each other. The sequence of them is your call. We've had a lot of people talk to us about this. It's a really great feature to get things ready. Everybody has a story about the land people running down the hall finally, having acquired their land and leaning all over the well licensing people to immediately get an application. So some people think, well, as in the well licensing area, we may not go ahead and advertise that we have the approval in hand, or some of them with this very rapid processing are saying, you know what, we'll wait. When he comes running down the hall, we'll push the button on the application that's pre-prepped and ready to go, and we'll have an approval back in such a quick time. We're not going to be the person who's on the pointy end of the stick all the time waiting to get secondary approvals before you can be active. So we're trying to get as much flexibility in here as we possibly can. We've got an introduction of standardized shapefiles. Those are not new organizationally. They are in pipelines. They are in the Public Lands Act. We had some of the surveyors in today in the morning. Are there any surveyors here today? Hey, perfect. We do know we have been unaware that the your survey association hadn't actually sent some of this stuff out to you, but it left the building here on Monday. And it is with your Land Surveyors Association, so you can see exactly the components of a survey plan. So survey plans don't change, but it's the shapefile that is being introduced. Details in that shapefile are what is going to start your well license application. That gets uploaded, evaluated, those risk assessments go, but a bunch of data starts to populate. So this is going to be a very good marriage between your surveyors and yourselves to make sure that you're telling them what you want to do. If you ask them to go out and survey and put in the shapefile a whole bunch of other wells you're going to license later, that won't work. You can put that on the survey plan because the survey plan's only being read by people, not by the computer. So at the end of the day, whatever you put in a survey plan, or in a shapefile, pardon me, is exactly what's going to upload to start your application file. So keep that in mind, and we're going to help where we can to make sure that there's a good exchange and information. The material that went out today, the technical material about what the components are that go into this, that went Monday, they're getting up on the website almost right away here, and there will be additional postings of those requirements so that the surveyors can work independently and have the material that they will have to do to prepare for you. There is no change to sketch or surveys. Nobody here probably is doing sketches. We've had to preserve an activity that allows a sketch to be done by a private landowner who's just doing a domestic water well, because if they're greater than a certain depth, we still have to give him a processing window. So we have kept that there's a little small button that just says, if you're that domestic water well guy, push here, and he will go into a different kind of associated process that will manage those kinds of applications through. So I am going to talk about, and I'm going to talk about this a little more high level than I did here this morning. I can I mean, what do you need to know about what we did? So we have a Lahee classification system that's been in place for about 70 years. We've been a little late adjusting it. British Columbia and Saskatchewan did some changes on this. Some time ago, they're operating with a different hybrid of what they're doing that is the original primary, clean Lahee system. And I asked this, but I get such a different response. I'll just tell you. So does it? Fred Lahee, he's a guy. He's no longer with us. He was down in Texas and he developed this system, and it is an economic evaluation system to be able to tell what is an area doing. And it was super helpful when the areas, you might apply it in Texas, we've applied it in Alberta and British Columbia and Saskatchewan. It allows you to see and evaluate what is happening in the province. Are we doing lots of exploration? Are we lending ourselves to activity? Are we doing a lot of activity that brings the potential for renewable resources to be developed? Or are we heavily entrenched in exploiting what we know? And that allows people to get a good look and make predictions and do all kinds of things, but it really is more a qualitative assessment than a quantitative assessment. So we started some work on it actually back in 2000s, and we did a huge survey out to industry actually through what was CPAC at the time and CAP, and probably had 150, 175 responses on everything that you can imagine to do with classifications, some comp work and so forth. I want to tell you that we've gone back and relied on a bit of that because it was such a detailed review. And then we looked at what we could do here to get into a more simplified situation alone. So what we've done is we have eliminated the classification of 4 exploratory types. So the new field wildcat, new pool wildcat, outpost and deeper pool tests that are assigned on some level of exploratory situation. So a great distance away, quite a bit deeper, quite a bit shallower, variety of things like that. We have eliminated that and compressed it into exploratory. You are no longer going to have to do tons of work to figure out what it is. Are you looking for a new pool, or are you looking to get something extended by a long way? Are you well below an established pool? All that wording is in what I've talked to you about for Directive 56. And I'm going to let you, I'm not going to spend much more time on this except to tell you that we've modified that piece of it. 4 have compressed to 1. So you're going to be exploratory or you're going to be development. You're exploiting or you're exploring. And we think that's a simpler system that still gives us the economic sense of what we're trying to do. So that's in a nutshell what it says in the administrative changes in 56. The second thing we looked at is the use of confidential below. So if you work any of that data and management data, we do need to know confidentiality applies to your data at the time we license your well. We want to get that out as the primary record. It tells you how we're going to treat the data when it starts rolling in. We can't pause and all the well logs are in here and we're saying, well, how do you want us to treat them? So that work has to be done ahead of time. So we have 3 classifications, 3 types of confidentiality pieces: confidential entirely, non-confidential entirely, or confidential below. And what the confidential below does is it's in place, it's in the rules, it talks about it, and it says, look, if you're going below a pool and you're going to do something below it, basically, we're going to make everything up to the point that a pool that's present exists, a non-confidential pool. And we're going to make that data all available as a routine basis, and then only hold the other part. Well, when I talked about doing the right things at the right time, what data do we have at the point we're licensing the well? It's not drilled. We don't have any information. There's no logs, there's no tests, there's no core analysis or cuttings or things like that. We need to wait until the data is here, is what we solved for ourselves, and seemed to be a bit of a point with the industry even 10 years ago. And we've said, look, let's just look at this once. We'll go in and either on our own initiative, we'll go in and look at a well that seems to be present in the pool, and we have maps that show us that, and we will look and we will see whether or not it seems to apply to that well. And the well, if it does apply, we would look to amend a well that's being held confidential and release part of it, but only after conferring with you. So there won't be changes on these kinds of wells. We commit to whatever it says on your license, what you put in, what we've accepted. If it's fully confidential, it'll stay that way, but you will be re-engaged if there's a concern or a request or a need to look at it. The rules that we're working with tell us how to use it. We're going to use it at the right time. So what it did in these two things was take 55 combinations of well classifications and confidential possibilities and reduce them to like 13 or 15. And that made it a lot easier to tell the computer to look at it in a certain way, provide you a consistent piece, and get back to you at the right time when we have adjustments that are necessary for partial releases. Other than that, everything else is staying the same. We're not putting any data out that we haven't given you a date on. That's the other piece, is that there's predictability in wells that are confidential and just go a whole year. If they never have anything happen, they'll sit confidential for a whole year. But we wanted to make sure that you're always engaged. You're going to know ahead of time, because that will not be as easy to predict. So you will know before anything happens. So what it's returned to here in the classification work, we use drilling spacing units because they're easy to understand as far as gas wells and oil wells, a section versus a quarter section and things. But if you start on the left-hand side, we've represented a well that's shallower than the pool that's in the area. But so really the pool being present is inconsequential. So that well is both exploratory and confidential. A well in the next position, in number 2, is a well that we would typically have previously called a deeper pool test. It's passing through the pool, but no different than if you're trying to get to Edmonton, you have to pass through Red Deer. Is it important that you're going through Red Deer? So it may or may not be important that you're passing through that pool, but we'll determine that eventually when the well is drilled, and we can look at the data and see what's important about that. The development non-confidential one in the 3rd position is going to drill into that pool. It's inside the pool. It's going to go out, and you should choose development non-confidential on a well like that. So the other ones, once you get out to about 2 drilling spacing units, you're going to be questioned a little bit. If you're using exploratory in that 2 drilling spacing unit, you will probably need to defend that it's complex geology enough, the kinds of things you did before. But you're not going to debate about how exploratory it is. And that's what introduced those 4 other categories, was a lot of debate and discussion, a lot of work in your shop, a lot of work at the AAR here trying to figure out which one was the right one to reflect that exploratory nature. So we're going to let you get out about 2 drilling spacing units. If you are in an area of geological complexity, you can call it confidential, confidential and exploratory, and that information is in the material that you'll see. It makes a lot more sense, which is why I don't want to go into too much here. And eventually, once you get past 2 drilling spacing units, you're back into exploratory territory. It doesn't matter if you're shallow or deeper or really deeper. You're going to be using, you're going to be trying to explore for something at any level in the well. So I want you to see that stuff before we spend, and we won't spend any more time on it unless you have any questions. We have preserved the 6 classifications, just back on the other slide, that we took on as our hybrid, and we still want to use the re-entry. So it's the second line down there under exploratory. Re-entry, development service wells, oil sound evaluation wells, test holes, experimental wells, and other. And you'll notice we did work a little with the XPL, means exploratory, EXP is the experimental wells. The other thing that we did was just modify slightly the drill cuttings requirements, because again, if we've lost 4 distinct categories, let's just compress it, see what the middle ground is, and the cuttings have been slightly adjusted. You may not even notice it, but they've just adjusted them slightly to align with development and exploratory categories of wells. So one very deliberate and purposeful change in here, and I know that I have waste people and things like that. Can I call them that? Waste people. People who are doing wells to dispose of things. And I want to draw your attention to the fact that Well, the other classification actually allows you to license a well to dispose of what? Dispose of brine, dispose of acid gas. There's a manual 12 table that I'm in the middle of just redoing so you can see all the proper connections. But people are mixing up injection and disposal. And so we've written within these well classification changes, we've emphasized something there about this. If you are putting a product into a reservoir to support that reservoir, if it is gas or water or things like that, anything where you're doing an injection program in order to support reservoir recovery, you are injecting. If you are getting rid of something that you are disposing of, like the acid gas, things like that, it is your goal is to isolate it from any other production. You are disposing, and we need you to start using those things consistently, because that's been an area of significant problems where there's the Department of Energy's been really cranky about it with us, and I think with some of you. If you've got licenses that are going through improperly using the terminology and also claiming confidentiality where you're not entitled to. So they've given you agreements that say you have to be non-confidential, and they say that to you in your agreement. It's not a mineral lease, it's just an agreement. And when they tell you that, they watch it, and if it doesn't come out that way, they are on the blower to us within hours. So we need to get that working properly, and that, so I want you to have that is clearly indicated in the Directive 56 now, so that you can confidently choose the right category of classifications between injectors and disposers. Continuing on what's new. So these next 3 slides give you really all the features that are new within this application. So you can confirm you have either acquired done a pre-application variance, so that might be things like your cuttings, like your casing, and so forth. You can do that pre-application, or you can do it in application, your call. If you're going to do it in application, you're going to have a upload into a little icon of the material you want us to consider in approving your variance, and at that point it will be processed as an additional review, and it will be processed as part of that non-routine type process. So that's a big feature, because if you do, and we are also asking you, if you actually get an application or an amendment, a variance approved ahead of time, you're just indicating there you are not adding it. So if there's an audit, they might ask for it then. If there's something in records, eventually we'll go looking for it, but we're not asking you. This is this discontinuation of asking you multiple times for the same data. If you did it once, we'll find it. There's in an application request area now for 1 or 2 year licenses. And the 1 or 2 year licenses mean that the 1 year has been normal. We've gone for 2 years, you have to ask for it today within a covering letter, and we're not asking you to do that. You can indicate that you want a 2 year license, and it's going to give you a pop-up whenever that happens. And pop-up, I'm going to say a couple more times. A pop-up's going to come and say, look, public involvement programs are only good for a year, you know that. Survey plans are typically only good for a year. You need to do a little bit of work. If you're picking a 2 year license and you're in that 2nd year before you're using it, you need to look at updating those things if necessary. So there's and it's a reminder to do that. It does not stop your processing. You have to acknowledge it, and your application will continue to process. Auto well name generator. There's actually a section right around the well name, and people, I know the industry people feel they definitely wanted the opportunity to do this themselves, not have to do it when they're getting a surveyor out there. This is all done in application. So it is going to populate initially your company name or abbreviation. It's going to populate the field or strike area from the internal maps that are in the system, and it's going to put the digits without zeros of the bottom hole location. You've got 36 characters, that's still the same, but you have the opportunity then to say, I want to generate my own name, and you're going to go in and you're going to make the changes to those ones in between the company name and the field name, and you're going to put anything in there that you want to that makes it unique and that works for you. You then say, this is my new well name, I accept it, and carry on. If you get later in the application and want to come back and fix it, and we are talking about trying to get you an opportunity to do this in the amendments later on as well, trying to give you control over your well name. It's a nice, unique key. We just all need to know what it is. We just don't need to be too involved in the business practices of what you're setting. So you would do that right in the application and carry on. Indefinite retention, and this was a big piece. You guys, I think right now, and Isai, I think you're timed out at 5 days if you're working on a draft application. So that doesn't happen anymore after we go live. So you are going to be able to put a draft application together. You're going to be able to run your validations. You're going to run all your assessment rules and whatever you want. And if you leave it there for the next 6 months, it will stay there for the next 6 months with applications attached or whatever. All of that's going to happen on your control. But you know, with great power comes great responsibility. So remember that we're not going in there taking anything out. If you have failed to take it past draft stage, it will just stay there. So work out something within your companies to make sure that you're keeping that cleaned up. Nobody likes to go in there and find out if this is a file that am I doing something with, who's doing something with, and so forth. So, but that is in your hands, and we're confident that you'll manage it well. We have a current linkage. I'm going to call it a linkage. It's not an official connection yet to the public land disposition process. But what we need to know is that if you are on public lands, we're asking you to tell us either an application number or where you made an application, where you have an approval, anything like that. We are trying to do some work for the future to prepare linkages very specifically to anything on public lands, so that, I mean, they're now all in-house here, right? They're just so recent that we couldn't make the connection in this past, but we do want to in future connect the activity for the well, the lease that it's on, with the public land disposition that matches it. So we are asking you to give us that number at the moment. Today you'll write in application or approval or whatever it is. There's about 4 or 5 things where it could be attached to that application. If you're doing an integrated application, just tell us at the moment. I know it sounds like we should be able to look over the wall on the other side. We just can't at the moment because we're in a bit of infancy with both systems here right now, so we haven't been able to build that in. We've already talked about the no duplication of information, anything we previously obtained. HRA, so Historical Resources Act, was something that there's been oversight here at the old ERCB, the AAR today, on trying to ensure that Alberta culture, historical resources, those kinds of things are managed well. There was absolutely a very poor system to be able to let you know where that was in place 20 years ago when this all started. And that stuff got on our form. Government departments that sort of get together and say, we'll help each other. There were paper documents about where there was artifacts, where you should have a review of things, where you should actually go out and get, do an assessment and possibly get Historical Resources Act clearance. We were the only game in town 20 years ago. Now there's like 4 of them ahead of us. So there's a whole historical resource lookup on, it's called Hermes or something. It's on the Fed side. Every province in the country, you can go in and see what there is in Parry Sound or something and see what there is there that has artifacts or concerns. There is a provincial one. The surveyors are using whichever they use to do it, but they are listing on their survey to you whether or not there are artifacts present. And then the energy development planning tool that has landed in the PLA, in the public lands piece, that's telling you too. So 4 things in front of this. This needs to come off the form. Doesn't mean you stop doing it. You're already doing it in different ways. And I want to pause and give you kudos here, because one of the questions I asked myself, because this was a bit of an old world piece of mine, was, what did the auditing of this stuff tell us? Because auditing stuff tells us, looking back at things you've filed and you've said, yes, 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 this is all good, I'm fine. And then the auditor visits and they have a look and they say, you know what, it's fine. Or it's not fine, or these pieces are problematic. And there's value in those records for a bunch of reasons. But here's a really special value of this. Talking with the people in the audit team on Directive 56 applications about this particular oversight, they said that there's only been 2 occasions ever that somebody just ticked the wrong box, but it's 100% compliant. Nobody has ever registered an application for which a Historical Resources Act application or approval was needed and they hadn't acquired one, or disturbance occurred and they hadn't acquired one. So you're doing a perfect job. So why, this is what we're trying to do even in some of this work, is use those kinds of results to inform us about things we can stop doing. If we don't, the rule still exists, I just don't have to sit and, do a declaration to you about all the things you have to do because you're doing it perfectly. And we need more results like that by looking at our results in order to grow this and ensure that we're focusing on the right things as applications are changing over the years here. So that's just a great example of what has gone really well. So that's redundant, of course, and has been now entirely discontinued. The well category and type on the Directive 56 is currently determined by you, and then you complete the application. Now you're just going to complete the application, and there's going to be a grayed out area to inform you that based on your responses, this is the category you are. So it's going to be there, you're going to see it, you know what it is in 56 today. If you've ended up with a result, though, that is not what you were expected, or not what you thought you were applying for, please go back and check the detail that relies on that, because the descriptor of those categories are going to lead you to know what it is that is wrong in this application. It might be right, it's all validating, but it might be wrong because that's not the category of well type that you were expecting to license. So lively discussion about the cover letter and the comment box. So we currently have even requirements for things that you have to give us a cover letter on. You have to tell us in a cover letter because we don't have a spot for it. One of them being things like that 1 year, 2 year license. Another one being when you go in and you're drilling a coal bed methane well and it's taking production above basic groundwater, things like that, and you've got to tell us what your plan is, a budget assessment like that. Well, what we know is that, and that comes in on a additional basis. We have hit a point where we think that every application question, every place where you're asked to put something, that's it. That is everything we need to assess your application, to give you an approval on that application. And we don't want to deal with anything else that introduces something else there. We have nothing else we need to know. That's our commitment to you. So when you have to write us a covering letter now, we have to read it. That just seems only nice. We should look at it and see what it is you're trying to tell us. Well, the number one reason that industry told us why what they would want, what do you want to write us about? Now that you see all this, and you can see how it works, and you can see what you're putting in here, what do you need to tell us? And they, without fail, they all went, we just need to tell you when we really need a fast approval. And we kind of went, okay. We get that. That is what this system is all about. So if we deny you the opportunity to tell us you need it, we'll just get that to you and you'll be happy because that's how the system's going to work. So you don't need to tell me you need it fast. You need to get the application all done, get it right. If it's baseline, it's going to come back to you in speedier time than you think. So we're going to touch on that in a second about what kind of turnaround times there are. We will revisit this in the future if we have to. If something comes up that we say, look, this is, you can always send something to an email, like an email in, and the staff internally can attach things, but we just don't want to have a system that relies on that because you will divert all kinds of applications that don't need to be into that additional review category. So we're asking you to bear with us and try this, and if it becomes problematic, we'll work on doing something with it. Talked about the land approval here. I'm not going to go over it again, but the opportunity to get the well license before the land approval is issued, that's a consequence of the changes we've made. A PDF of the application and the license, and they're really looking nice. I should have put one in here, but we were into last minute edits on things. They are grayed and faded and bolded and stuff, and we brought one to the session that the industry people came in who were on our working team, and they looked at it and went, oh, I like this. Immediately saw what they did. It is a record that's PDF, so you can take it then once you're done with and you're getting ready to submit, PDF it, it's going to come to you and you're going to be able to file it, print it, whatever you want to do with it. You can keep it in your electronic records, you can print it and put it in your paper records, but you're going to see in perpetuity then, you don't have to rerun it ever again. That's exactly how you submitted it. Your license is going to be like that too. And the license doesn't have tons of changes, but the license, which is also, it comes to you as a PDF, of course, as a license when it's issued. You're going to hold that. But there are some, it looks very similar to what it does today, except that we have added a few other items on it, and that's, again, prep work for the future, is that when we get to phase 2 that we'll talk about at the very end, we want to make sure that everything that you can amend is on that license, so that here's the first license, here's the amendment of that license, and that it's going to help you with your record keeping going forward. So I'm just going to quickly go through these last ones. We've got the validation on each page. It is actually, the button is on each page. You can choose to get all the way to the end and validate it then, or you might be into this business part of the application, validate it on the page. Validate it, print it, do anything you want per page, and that, or all the way to the end to get the whole thing. So that might let you walk around with a document and get some other things people have within your company that they haven't forwarded to you or so forth. But in any case, you can do that at any time. There are tool tips, little I with little circle around it, information, so I mean additional information, tooltips throughout the application, especially on anything we've done that's new. Hover over it, it's just going to give you some blurb that gives you a little more detail, so you don't have to jump to a directive or manual 12 or things like that. So we've put it in every place that we think that it is helpful. Here's the big number page. So there is 20% reduction in the amount of stuff you're putting in this application compared to the old one. And those are pieces that we've been driving for. Make sure we need it, are we using it, decisions, right time, all those things we talked about in the first place. Application details down by 20% in here. Some of the people who were in the working group who generated off the top of their head a well license, they just created it, put it in, and that they were doing well licenses 3 minutes, about 3 minutes. Filling what has to be filled in. So, that's not always going to be the case. You're going to be able to use it because of the draft function to say, I'm just going to put in what I have right now and start letting it tell me where I'm missing stuff. So you'll find your own way through this. You're going to get email notifications on successful registration and on disposition. We have targeted 90% of automation on new well licenses, and we kind of just see it going up from there. So when we don't have letters to read that we don't need to and so forth, we're going to at least get 90% of them out of the door on a baseline, and they're going to go out in under 10 minutes. So that is what we've predetermined from what we have now, which is huge for, we only do things now, we tag things in statistics on days, so we may have to get them to change the parameter of hours or something. So that is, it's ambitious, it's significant, it's going to get you stuff in your hands and it doesn't compromise. Everything that we've done does not compromise public safety or any of the decision making we have to do. So we're super proud of this. We're very focused on what this is going to do. We think that the industry, we hope, is very satisfied with this, and here at the AR that we're going to be very happy to be able to get your stuff through in that kind of a rapid way. So we talked about those pop-ups. I just want to catch a couple more so you know the kind of thing we're doing, because this is a new processing way of handling things. We used to send down that way of looking at additional review. So coal bed methane, we talked about that. You have to put all this stuff in a letter. You got to send it in, and it's a covering letter. So what we might have gone right away is just say, oh, well, we'll just put an attachment there and get them to load it up. We don't want to look at it. It's not the right time, and you're doing very, very, very well at that. You're going to get a pop-up. When you've put in the detail parameters that say, I'm a coal bed methane well, you're going to call it coal bed methane, you're going to have certain formations in certain areas, and the computer's going to know that you are a coal bed methane, and it's going to give you a pop-up. It's going to remind you that you need to review this in the context of Directive 35, so that this essence of what the message says. It's messaging to you. You're going to have to acknowledge it to get out of the screen. That's all that's happening. We carry on processing. We do not stop and ask you to submit that stuff. If it is needed or needs to be looked at, they'll look at it and audit, or you can have a discussion with somebody else later if there's a problem with it. But you're trusted to I don't name every directive. We don't name every directive in the work. We're trusting that you go ahead and work under the regulatory framework that you already know exists. So another example, so that's one that by the data elements is going to get a little pop-up. Another one that gets a pop up. Some of you may work in the Braza River area as an example, so that's an area that has had a recent subsurface order, so around the dam. And there's some concerns when we're in areas with hydraulic fracturing operations. Well, gosh, that's way down the road too. So right off the bat, that's something, do I need to know that at the licensing stage? So we validated it at that point, but we know spatially you're in that area that's been drawn. A new subsurface order was issued, and there's features and lots of stuff in the subsurface order that you need to abide by. You need to go and access and look at it. Once again, all we're going to tell you is this thing's in subsurface order number 6, and you need to review the order to see what applies to you. I acknowledge that you're out and going, and so we are not reviewing that up front, partly because we've got a pop-up process in place for you to remind you, and because it's not the right time to look at hydraulic fracturing operations when you're just drilling the well. Okay? So lots of sensible things happening in there when you hear this. Here's what I need you to know about what's going to happen over this next couple of weeks. And I'm a big fan of not being a black box here, so I'm going to give you a little detail. You'll probably go, oh, I don't know why I need to know that, but I'm going to make sure you understand why you do. So the bulletin's not out yet, which is why you're hearing some of this now. It's going to be out by the end of next week. Those D56 revisions, those administrative revisions will be out. So in preparation for go live Thursday, October the 17th, okay? No new well applications can be submitted in EASE, which is your current system, after 5 o'clock on the 10th. So imagine where we're at, that we're on a Thursday, so the prior Thursday is the 10th. Submit all day long for well licenses. You will be able, by the way, to continue submitting for other kinds of applications in EASE. Anything else you're doing in EASE is not cut off, but we are cutting off wells because we have to have a clean out period before we go live with OneStop. So we will shut down at 5 o'clock. No new well licenses can go in. So for a whole week, although it's the long weekend and there's a Monday off, for really 3 business days. So the Friday the 11th and the Tuesday and Wednesday, 15th and 16th, there is nowhere to file a well license application. So you're going to make a call here. I'm hoping you're not going to load up this stuff, because what's going to happen over those 3 days, I mean, if you're concerned, if you want to, you get it, obviously we're going to do our very best to get it out, but if we get a great volume of stuff submitted on those 3 days where we're cut off, or up to that point, those 3 days the staff are going to work to process that stuff and get it out the door, because as of the day we go live, there's not only been no submission and that kind of thing, we have some struggles with where we disposition applications. So we only can disposition, because of the change in the systems, out of the system they were submitted in. So if you put an EASE IR well license application in, it's coming out of EASE IR. If you put it in on Thursday the 17th, it's going to come out of OneStop. So part of this will be, are you going to take your chances on the morning of the 17th to say, yeah, no, she said 10 minutes, so I'm going to wait and put my license in. And you may find that you'll get that license from the new system in its prompt way of dealing with your application faster than you will for the ones. I can't dissuade you if you want to put them in and commit that they're in, so your call. But we want you to know what's happening behind the scenes so that you can make a very informed decision. So now you know when it stops, you know when it starts. I mean, you're not going to be able to put anything new in past that point on the 10th in EASE IR, so you're going to be working in the new system on the 17th. That said, all that stuff has to go out of the system. So in order to accomplish that, we had 2 problems. One is that a well identifier, a unique well identifier, is set the moment we are approving a license. Okay, and the go get a new well license number, which is also in a queue, you go get that too. So 2 things happen, and they have to happen independently in these systems. We cannot issue well licenses out of OneStop and well licenses out of the EASE IR and have them compete for those 2 things. That was the net of our decision making. So we have put in place a really simple red light, green light. So I want you to know that while you aren't going to submit more things back here, soon as you're working in OneStop, it is going to run 22 of 24 hours a day. So you don't have a date on Saturday night, feel free to come in and start putting well license applications in, and if it's 2 o'clock in the morning, they're going to come out at 2:10. So you're okay with things like that. That said, if you are since we can only process out one system at a time, for the time being, and we're going to have to adjust to this as we see the volume of things that are stuck back in EASE-IR, we're going to have to say, look, we still have to get those ones out. So for the period in the near foreseeable future, let's say maybe at least 2 weeks to a month, we are going to shut down the issuance of the well license in OneStop at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we're going to restart it at 5 o'clock. Doesn't mean you can't file, you can continue to process, but as that license moves through in its prompt little way, it's going to hit a closed door, and it's not going to go out until after 5 o'clock. And what it allows, we just switch the tracks. We just say, stuff coming out of IR has to be actually manually managed, dispositioned by a person who has a signing authority, a variety of other things, all of which took up time, but they're going to stay on top of that. We need to let those continue to flow out, but only during a very focused time, and the systems will turn themselves off and on outside of us. This is why I tell you it's a bit of a black box thing, but if we're working internally, we can see if we try to send something through and it's out of those time frames, we'll be told that. It'll just say then this is going to sit until 5, and it's not going to go out till then. Don't stop processing, don't stop sending it in, but because I've given you an expectation of a very short turnaround time, I don't want you sitting there at 3:15 saying, what's going on? Is that thing going down? This is what we expected. That's not the issue. The issue is that you've got it stuck in the window. We will reduce that window as the inventory reduces. But you've got files in there in the old system that will be dispositioned that might be a year old, 2 years old. They're in hearing processes. They're in statements of concern or holding them up. So have regard for that. You'll be able to see how things are processing. We'll try to keep you up to date on announcements on the OneStop landing page so you know what's going on. And we will reduce that time frame as soon as we can. We'd like to have 24 hours out of 24 hours of running your OneStop stuff, and we'd move to that as quickly as we can. We may get to a point where we can just manually turn something off, run something through for 15 seconds and turn something else back on. But we'll see what we can do. We just are cognizant we want to keep you working in the new system as much as we can. But I share that with you so that you can modify your expectations a little bit just as we work through the inventory that's there. I appreciated especially the good working group that we have and the fact that they talked about this application being so intuitive, and we're relying on that. We're hoping you're going to feel that way. We do have things I worry about that because we haven't had a lot of the training material out. Please stand by. It's all imminent to be released. So that's what we're doing in this. We're going to go to the phase 2. I'm just going to drop down this list quickly because I want you to know that we are going into a phase 2 of wells. This was all the new well licenses. So planning for phase 2 is underway. We're actually doing requirements for this at the same time we're trying to get this one out the door. Amendments to any parameter on the well license. So we've increased, I told you about increasing some of the things that are going to show up on a well license, and when you see that, know that it's because we're going to allow you to amend them in the future, which is such an easier process to use than to go through some other ones. Cancellations, so whether you are generating them, the ARs, consider whatever things that are timing out after the expiry date of the license, we're working through that. Applications for reentry, resumptions, and deepenings are potentially going to have quite a step change as well. We are trying to get down to easy business for the things that we need to do here and get you active with your licenses as quickly as we can here. So they are very likely to see a significant evolution in this next module. License term revisions, you're going to get 1 year, 2 year, you already know that. We might think of something beyond that, and we want to get an opportunity to do that again electronically under whatever conditions, and give you a process that you can kind of self-manage so that we're not having to be involved in too much of that if you meet certain requirements. So we're trying to get that as a future thing. Another one asked for by the industry group is that the rethink of drill cutting samples after well license is issued. Currently you have to write emails to 11 people or something. You're just going to go in here and make those changes, and they're going to get through to core research and handled. Some training and support materials. We have informed the Alberta Land Surveyors Association of all those details. We heard mixed discussion about that today in the morning session about whether or not you have it in your hands yet, and we've rechecked with them, and I think there's finally something happening there again. But we will also get the stuff posted on the AR website if that's material that you're looking for. If you have any concerns and you still don't have what you need, I'd ask you to get a hold of Jenny. You've got her email address, I think. If you don't, I'll make sure you have it. Industry training started. We did put out briefly last week an indication that we would start training earlier, but we are training in the same way of the training and people, the same kind of people doing the same kind of things, and we just don't think we can get any more in. So we took down earlier dates in preference of the ones that are actually going in the week that we are going live. And I've heard feedback on that, and it's all justified. It's sort of like, oh, you're going to turn it on. I don't know how to do it. And training starts like a day before. So we'll have the video up before that. The materials will be out in the bulletin that you'll need to do that, and we are going to rely heavily. You guys, you know your business. I think that this thing, and I'm going to rely on that intuitive piece and see how quickly those people in the working group came in, checked it, did their play date, and said bye-bye, and they were gone before I could get back to the room because they were able to get through the complicated part of the multi-well design, and it worked beautifully for them. So they felt very confident that you will feel the same way. We feel very confident that will happen. Events page for all of the dates about things coming up. Make sure you get on this listing if you don't have it already today. The email subscription that tells you things as it happens, so you don't have to go looking for it. Make sure you just take a subscription out. It'll just send them all to your email, and you're in good shape. Demonstration. So this presentation goes on the YouTube channel. The things that we've talked about here, this slide deck, and then the video that is, we're just in the final stages of that. It's prepped. It's going to be about 7 to 8 minutes long, and it's going to take you through an entire well license application and tell you visually what you're going to see, what you're going to do, if this is the response, and so forth. And that is, if we get that up really quickly, we're hoping that will also take some of the pressure off of the early training. It's an awkward call. We need the system tested to the nth, 10th, 11th, 12th degree to make sure it works well for you, and that everything we're putting in and adjusting, especially because of those legacy systems, happens before you get it. So we've had to say we can't spend time in the training rooms right now to get people through this. So we've chosen, and our leadership supported, that we would get these bugs out because we need it to work for you, and we need it to work clean. And that's where our time is going at the moment.